A huge thank you to patron Suki Stackhouse Lenin for suggesting today's video topic. If you want to suggest a topic for next Wednesday's Name Explain video, all you have to do is support Name Explain on Patreon for just $1 a month. Find out more by visiting patreon.com/Name Explain, which will be linked down below. Anyway, rivers. They're pretty important when it comes to this whole staying alive thing. They provide a source of fresh water for many people. Their banks tend to have pretty fertile soil, which is great for farming on. And their natural currents generally made it easier back in the day for us to transport goods and other humans up and down them. It's no wonder why some of the earliest forms of human civilization sprouted up across the banks of huge, fertile rivers. Even to this day, some of the grandest cities in the world have rivers darting through them. While we can all agree that rivers are really important, something we seem to struggle to agree upon with them is their names. Well, kind of anyway. River names tend to feature two words, one of those words being its more unique name. Think of names like the Seine, Nile, and Yangtze in example. In most parts of the world, these names aren't debated, and I say in most parts as in some nations like Australia, there actually is debate over if rivers should use their native names or names imposed on them by colonizers, but that's a whole different story. These unique river names are actually some of the most important names on our planet, as in many cases, larger areas are named after their rivers. This can range from cities like Amsterdam being named after the River Amstel, states like Mississippi being named after the Mississippi, and even whole countries like India being named after the Indus. These names are on the whole fine. The part of river names that end up being more debated is the second word which tends to appear in their name, with that word simply being the word of river. Most of the time the word river in a river's name can be found after its unique name. In example, we call this the Mississippi River, this the Sacramento River, and this the Hudson River, though technically the Hudson River isn't a river. These examples are from the USA, but if we look into rivers in other parts of the English-speaking world, we notice the word river comes after their actual names too. Canada, in example, is home to the Yukon River and St. Lawrence River. Australia, meanwhile, has the Murray River and the Peru River. New Zealand has the Tahiti River and the Cherwell River. Even Nigeria, which has a huge English-speaking population, goes with names like the Oba River and the Niger River itself, which, once again, the nation is named after. Even rivers in parts of the world that don't predominantly speak English tend to feature river after their name when translated, like China's Yellow River or Russia's Volga River. Though in many cases, non-English rivers tend to just be known by their main name in English and drop river altogether. Like the Danube is just called the Danube in most cases, and so is the Amazon. What this all means is that ultimately, when you hear a river's name, the word river itself will follow in most cases. But not all cases. One part of the world likes to buck this trend, and that place being my home nation of the United Kingdom. The language of English was birthed here many years ago. From here it mutated and spread across the wider world. The UK is chock full of famous rivers too. Take the Thames River, or the Mersey River, or the Tamar River. And if you're watching from the UK, those names probably all sounded pretty weird. It was weird for me to say them like that, trust me. And that's because while these rivers would be named like this in pretty much any other part of the world, here in the UK that isn't the case. Instead, in British English, the word river goes in front of the river's name. So it's not the Thames River, but instead the River Thames. That sounded better. Sorry for betraying you for a moment, my dear British English. This seems to be a quirk more or less exclusive to British English. The only other major English-speaking nation I could find who go with river then name as opposed to name then river was the neighbouring Ireland. For example, they have the River Shannon and the River Liffey. In regards to non-English-speaking nations who go this order, apparently it is present in France and Italy too, which kind of makes sense. I feel I would naturally say the River Seine instead of the Seine River, but maybe that's just my British bias. While British English chooses to go with this word order for its own rivers, it is resoundingly respectful of the word order of rivers around the world. Most British English speakers will respect the word order used in that part of the world and not switch it around to their language's preference. In example, most British English speakers would still say the Potomac River and not the River Potomac if they were in the USA. Likewise, the Yukon River will almost always be called that by Britain and Canada and not the River Yukon. A really interesting case is with the longest river in the world. The Nile can seemingly go by any name in any order. Many just call it the Nile, but the River Nile and the Nile River can be said too. Even Wikipedia claims this, so if it's good enough for them, then it's more than good enough for me. Also, yes, I know it's it's not actually the longest river in the world. We think the Amazon might actually be longer, but we haven't fully checked it yet. I don't know, someone should go check that. Though we aren't here to discuss what really is the longest river in the world, we are more interested in how these rivers are named. And in regards to how British English names these rivers, they have been doing it like this for a resoundingly long time. Many of these river names are supremely ancient, but evidence of the word river actually featuring in their name dates to around the 16th century at the earliest. In this time, their names were actually even longer. For example, instead of the Thames being called just the River Thames, it was referred to as the River of Thames, or the River Mersey was referred to as the River of Mersey, and so on. This is a pretty darn long-winded way of speaking about rivers, so it's unsurprising that this got shortened. This shortening seems to have happened around the late 17th century, when the of in the middle of these words was removed. This means that the River of Thames simply became the River Thames, and that is more or less how it has stayed to this very day in the UK. The late 17th century was an interesting time in British history, as it was around this time that the nation was busy colonising the land across the pond from them, a new world which was eventually dubbed the Americas. Britain would eventually find themselves with 13 colonies down the Atlantic coast of North America, and eventually those 13 colonies would find their own independence and expand westward to form the modern nation of the USA. From these colonies, English would dig its teeth into the new world before becoming the most widely spoken language in the USA. During the early days of British colonization of the Americas, rivers would have been referred to as the River of so-and-so, as they had been done initially in Britain. Thankfully, this was shortened in America too, with the of in the middle being ditched. We don't know why the of was ditched in both Britain and America, but it was probably because of how cumbersome it made these names, and removing it entirely just made the language far easier and snappier. Though for some reason, when the of was removed from rivers' names during the infancy of American English, something else happened too. The word of river floated downstream and found itself appearing after the actual name of the river, as opposed to before like it had been doing for so many years in English. This meant that the Mississippi, in example, went from being the River of Mississippi to the River Mississippi to simply the Mississippi River. This is a really odd change in the language, and in all honesty, we don't seem to be too sure as to why it actually happened. We do thankfully have a good range of theories on the matter, and I need to highlight that these theories, as well as much of the information in this video, came from posts on the Separated by Common Language blog and the Grammophobia blog. These are great blogs I always enjoy reading, so thank you so much for this information. A key theory is down to the fact that it makes way more grammatical sense for river to come after the actual name. This is all in relation to the word of. Of tends to be a possessive word, meaning we use it to claim that something or someone belongs to something or someone else. Like if you were trying to explain to someone that someone else is my friend, you would say they are a friend of Patrick's. However, if you choose to say this in a less formal way, then you would remove the of. When you do this, however, it is not grammatically correct to say friend Patrick's in English. Instead, we swap the words around and it becomes Patrick's friend. This is how grammar around the possessive of works, and as the of is somewhat possessive in these river names, it makes logical sense to switch the words around when the of is removed. I've just said of way too many times and I'm so confused right now, but anyway. Another theory relates to grammar too. In many cases, river names are actually descriptive of their nature. Sometimes this is more obvious with the Big River in California, and sometimes it's less obvious. Take the Cimarron River found in nations in the southwest. This word simply comes from a Spanish adjective meaning wild. The word river, meanwhile, is definitely a noun, and normally in English, adjectives come before nouns. Like if we want to describe a baby as being happy, we would say the happy baby, not the baby happy. Following this grammar rule, it makes logical sense to put the many adjective-based real names of rivers before the actual noun of river. Another less grammar-related theory boils down to the mixing of languages happening at this time in this part of the world. During this period of colonization in the US, the British weren't alone. There was also Dutch and Swedish colonizing happening too. These are languages which also place river after the name, so it's thought that American English might have borrowed this quirk from them. It could have been one of these reasons, a couple of them, all of them, or literally none of them, as to why this shift in the language happened. But nevertheless, it did happen, and it has since created one of the many differences between British English and American English that Brits and Americans like to squabble about whenever they get the chance to meet. What we really need to ask ourselves, however, is which one is actually correct? Well, personally, I don't believe in the idea of a correct single language. There is no one correct way of speaking any language. This is our wonderful tool and we can use it however we wish. But I do have to kind of give it to American English here, if I had to choose one as being correct. River coming after the name just makes way more grammatical sense, and if we're going under the assumption that there is a correct way to speak, then using grammar as our barometer of correctness is a good place to start. Yet while I think American English might be more grammatically correct, there is undeniably something great about River coming first in the name. It just sounds way more archaic and mystic, and really ties into the whole idea of the UK being an old, mysterious place. But in reality, this country isn't really that mysterious, and neither are its rivers. Just look into any river here in Britain, and you will probably find a shopping trolley or two. Name Explain depends on viewers like yourself supporting the channel financially on Patreon, so a huge thank you to everyone who does. Donating just $1 a month helps the channel amazingly and gets you bonuses including ad-free videos, exclusive content, the power to request ideas to be made into actual Name Explain videos, and your name at the end of the video with all these awesome people. Visit patreon.com/Name Explain or click the link down below to find out how you too can support the channel. Thank you. Thanks for reaching the end of the video. Why not watch another and subscribe to keep up to date on all things Name Explain. You can find myself on Instagram where I'm Name Explain YT, and join the Facebook group Friends of Name Explain to talk with myself and other name nerds. All that will be linked down below. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video, and once again, thank you all so much.